Okay, so um, I want you to just close your eyes for a second.
Yeah.
I want you to picture the calendar on your wall. It is February 2026.
Right.
The State of the Union address just wrapped up last night. You've probably seen the clips all over your social media. The pundits are screaming at each other on cable news. The applause lines are being completely dissected everywhere.
Yeah, the dust is definitely still settling in the Capitol today.
It is. But we actually aren't looking at the TV screens today.
No, we're doing what we always do. We are ignoring the noise, and we're looking directly at the paper trail.
Exactly. We're looking at the receipts. We have this massive stack of documents on the virtual desk today. I mean, I'm talking about press releases, internal memos, fact sheets, executive summaries.
I love it.
Yeah, all released directly by the White House in the immediate aftermath of the speech. And if you actually take the time to read these pages, not just the headlines, but the footnotes, the fine print, the stuff usually reserved for policy wonks.
The actual mechanics.
Right, the message is incredibly specific.
It's a very deliberate, carefully crafted narrative. I mean, they aren't just listing policies here. They are telling a story.
Yeah.
And the story is about a complete national U-turn.
A 180-degree turn in exactly 1 year. They are calling it the dawn of a golden age.
That's the exact
Golden age. And according to these files, the country has moved from carnage, which, by the way, is the specific word they keep repeating over and over, to prosperity. And at a speed that seems almost, mathematically impossible.
It is a very aggressive claim to make. And our mission for today's analysis is to figure out if that math actually holds up.
Right. Because we want to strip away the branding.
Yeah.
We want to peel off the political stickers and look at the engine underneath. What are the actual mechanics of this government in its second term?
Who is actually pulling the levers?
Exactly. And most importantly, when they say golden age, who exactly is that age golden for? Because we're going to look at which of these executive orders actually help or hurt regular Americans.
Not just in their intent, but in their actual effect.
Right. And before we get too deep into this, just a quick disclaimer for you listening. We are looking at these documents completely neutrally.
Completely impartially.
Yeah, we aren't endorsing any viewpoints here, left or right. We are simply unpacking the ideas contained in the original source material. We want to show you what's actually in here.
Because we have to remember the context of these sources, right? These are internal administration releases. The language is designed to persuade. It's designed to celebrate.
It's a victory lap.
Exactly. Our job is to parse through that celebration to find the actual policy friction. Who wins, who loses, what's a real benefit, and what's just political theater.
And there is a mountain of data to get through.
Yeah.
We're talking about tax codes, deportation logistics, drilling permits, crime stats. It is, honestly, it's a lot to process.
It's dense.
So let's start where most people feel it first. Let's start with your bank account. Let's talk about the golden age economy.
That is the centerpiece of their entire argument. If the money doesn't work, the rest of the message just falls apart completely.
So the documents highlight this specific piece of legislation. It's called the Working Families Tax Cuts Act.
Okay.
And they frame this as the absolute crown jewel of the second term's economic agenda. When you really break it down, it's essentially a triad of three big rakes. No taxes, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security.
It is a fascinating triad because of how targeted it is. Usually in tax policy, you see broad bracket adjustments, right? Like lowering the rate for everyone earning between $50,000 and $100,000.
A blanket cut.
Exactly. But this isn't that. This is highly situational. It depends entirely on how you earn your money, not just how much you earn.
Okay, so let's walk through that. Who is the actual target here? Who is this written for?
Well, just look at the labor map. No tax on tips is a laser-focused appeal to the service industry.
Yeah.
We're talking about the waitress at the diner, the bartender, the valet, the hairstylist. It's the hospitality sector.
People who rely on cash flow that fluctuates wildly day to day.
Right. And then you have no tax on overtime. That is squarely for the hourly wage laborer, manufacturing, construction, logistics, the people who physically punch a clock.
The folks asked to stay late on a Friday to finish a job.
Exactly. And no tax on Social Security is obviously for the retirees. So it's a very specific working class coalition.
Mechanically, though, it's pretty clever, isn't it?
Oh, it's brilliant mechanically. Think about it from an employer's perspective. Usually, if you want your workers to have more money in their pockets to combat inflation, you have to pay them more.
Which hurts your corporate bottom line.
Right. But here, the government steps in and says, hey, we will increase their take-home pay by just taking less of it in taxes. The employer doesn't have to give a single raise for the employee to feel like they got a massive raise.
So the government effectively subsidizes the wage with lost tax revenue. But wait, I want to dig into the no tax on overtime thing for a second, because that sounds amazing on paper.
It does.
But doesn't it create a really weird incentive structure?
It absolutely does. It completely warps the labor market. Because if regular hours are taxed and overtime isn't, you create a massive incentive for workers to chase those extra hours.
Yeah, you'd want to work as much overtime as possible.
Right. But you also create a dynamic where the regular 40-hour work week becomes functionally less valuable relative to the 50 or 60-hour week. It encourages a culture of severe overwork just to access that tax-free bracket.
And what about the people who don't get tips and don't get overtime, like the salaried middle manager?
They are completely left out of this specific benefit structure. If you are on a fixed salary of, say, $60,000 a year, you don't get tips, you generally aren't eligible for overtime pay.
So your tax burden stays exactly the same.
Exactly where it was. While the guy pouring concrete next door might effectively lower his overall tax rate way below yours simply by working weekends.
That creates a really interesting divide in the workforce. You're helping hourly workers, but completely bypassing the salaried middle class. But the administration claims this puts about $2,400 back in the pockets of the average family.
$2,400. That is a very specific, highly tangible number.
How are they getting to that math, though? Because tax situations are so incredibly different for everyone.
That is where we have to be very careful with this source material and look for deceptive wording. In these documents, they are aggregating a few things. They are counting the projected savings from the tips and overtime cuts, but they are also heavily factoring in what they call a 15% increase in tax refund.
Wait, let's pause right there. Let's flag that. Because a tax refund isn't actually free money. I feel like we need to clear this up.
It is not free money at all. And it's a common misconception that administrations love to exploit for political theater.
Right.
A tax refund just means you overpaid the government out of your own paycheck during the year, and now they're just giving you your own money back, totally interest-free.
So if refunds are supposedly up 15%, what does that actually mean?
It might just mean that the withholding tables were quietly adjusted to take more out of people's checks during the year, or that certain standard deductions were structured differently. It doesn't mean you actually paid less tax overall.
But politically, it feels like a total windfall.
Politically, it feels like a giant check in the mail with the president's name on it. It triggers the psychology of a year-end bonus. Even if it was literally your money all along, getting it in a lump sum feels like a massive gift.
So when you combine that psychological win with the tip and overtime tax elimination, it creates a very powerful narrative of cash in hand for regular Americans.
It's a very compelling story, yes.
But we have to pivot to the other massive expense for families right now, which is housing. Because this is where I saw an executive order in this stack that genuinely made me stop and reread the page twice.
You're talking about the ban on institutional investors.
Yes. The document details an executive order straight up prohibiting large institutional investors from purchasing single-family homes. This is wild. So the last decade, the biggest complaint I've heard from anyone trying to buy a starter home is that they get outbid by a faceless hedge fund paying all cash over asking price.
It's been a massive systemic issue. Large funds, Wall Street giants, they've been buying up housing inventory because they view single-family homes as a stable, yield-generating asset class.
They buy them, turn them into rentals forever, and completely price out the individual family buyer.
Exactly. So this executive order is a massive, and I mean massive, intervention in the free market.
Which is incredibly ironic, isn't it? A Republican administration interfering in the free market this aggressively?
It's populism actively overriding traditional economic conservatism. The administration is framing this as blocking Wall Street to save Main Street. They are explicitly prioritizing the individual regular homeowner over the wealthy corporate shareholder.
So in our ledger of who's actually helped, this is a huge tangible win for the regular American trying to buy a house.
Theoretically, yes. If you suddenly remove all that artificial demand from deep-pocketed corporations, housing prices should stabilize or even drop, and inventory should open up for regular families.
Right.
There is always a but in these documents. We have to look at the other side of the housing policy mentioned right next to it in the very same fact sheet.
You mean the removal of the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule?
Yes. It's a mouthful of a bureaucratic name, but it is a critical piece of regulation when we talk about dignity and equality.
So what does that rule actually do? Or I guess, what did it do before they just scrapped it?
The Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, or AFFH, was a federal mandate. It required local communities that receive federal housing money to actively identify and address patterns of racial and economic segregation in their neighborhoods.
Okay.
It basically forced cities to look at their maps and say, hey, why is this specific neighborhood entirely wealthy and white, and this one over here is poor and minority? And then they had to actually create a plan to fix it through zoning changes or affordable housing investment.
And the administration just scrapped it completely.
They did. And look at how they frame it. The documents frame the removal as streamlining. They say it cuts red tape and saves money for local governments.
They argue Washington shouldn't be telling a local suburb how to zone its own streets.
Exactly. So look at the stark contrast. On one hand, you're helping the regular guy buy a house by banning Wall Street. But on the other hand, you are removing the civil rights guardrails that ensure that house is in a neighborhood that is equally accessible to everyone.
So it's a huge deregulation move that arguably hurts the cause of housing equality and dignity for marginalized groups.
That is the trade-off they're making. It prioritizes the financial transaction of buying the house over the social regulation of integrating the neighborhood. It's a massive signal to suburban voters. It says, we will protect your property values and we will protect your local control from federal meddling.
It feels like a very specific, almost retro vision of the American dream. You own your home, no hedge fund takes it from you, and no one from Washington tells your local town board how to run itself.
Right. And to maintain that dream, you need to be able to afford the mortgage and you need to afford the groceries. Which brings us directly to inflation. The White House is taking a massive victory lap here in these papers.
They claim inflation is down to 2.4% and gas is under $3 a gallon.
$2.99 is the number they keep flashing in big, bold red text.
And they are very clear about why they think this happened. They don't credit the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes. They don't credit global supply chain shifts.
No, they credit two specific things: stopping reckless spending and unleashing American energy.
Which brings us to Section 2 of our deep dive into these sources: energy dominance. Or, as the documents literally put it in giant letters at the top of the page, drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, subtlety is not the goal here.
Not even a little bit. I mean, listen to these stats they're bragging about. A 55% increase in drilling permits. That is 6,000 new applications approved on federal lands in 1 year.
It's an astronomical acceleration.
And record LNG exports, 100 million metric tons.
That LNG number, liquefied natural gas, is very significant. It positions the U.S. not just as energy independent, but effectively as the gas station for the entire world. But the administration's argument here is what's really interesting. They connect this massive industrial output directly to restoring consumer freedom.
Consumer freedom. That sounds like a focus group-tested marketing term. What does it actually mean in this policy context?
It means buying whatever you want without the government nudging you toward a greener or more efficient option. They specifically list household appliances: dishwashers, shower heads, gas stoves.
Oh, the dishwasher thing. I remember all the complaints that modern dishwashers take 3 hours to run a cycle because they're trying to save water.
Exactly. The administration calls those efficiency standards burdensome regulations. Their argument is very straightforward. We are going to let you buy a dishwasher that uses way more water and way more energy, but it gets the job done in 45 minutes.
So they are actively framing environmental efficiency as a constraint on your personal freedom.
Correct. Instead of saying this dishwasher saved the planet, the narrative is this dishwasher works better for you, the regular American. It centers the immediate, tangible user experience over the abstract, long-term environmental impact.
And speaking of abstract environmental impacts, we have to look at the number attached to the Paris Climate Accord withdrawal in this packet.
That's a big one.
I circled this one in red because it dumped off the page. The document says withdrawing from the Paris Accord prevents $20,000 in lost income per family.
It's a very scary number.
It is terrifying. $20,000. Where does that math even come from? It feels like deceptive wording.
It is designed to be scary, and we definitely need to unpack it because it's a classic statistical trick. It likely comes from worst-case scenario economic modeling from a friendly think tank.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, if you take the absolutely most stringent possible interpretation of carbon reduction, meaning shutting down all fossil fuel factories, retrofitting every single building in the country, banning all gas cars immediately, and you model the total macroeconomic cost of that to the entire U.S. GDP over a decade or two.
Right.
And then you just divide that massive macro number by the number of households in America. You can mathematically arrive at a number like $20,000.
So it's like a projection of a theoretical worst-case scenario over a long period of time, just chopped up per capita.
Exactly. But by presenting it in these fact sheets as a present tense fact, they literally say, we saved you $20,000. They frame environmental protection not as saving the earth, but as the government literally stealing 20 grand from your personal bank account.
It takes the global climate crisis and shrinks it down into a kitchen table financial issue.
It forces a very specific choice. Do you want to save the ice caps, or do you want to keep $20,000? And when gas prices are high or groceries are expensive, that is a very easy choice for a lot of regular families to make.
It's incredible framing. And on the flip side of that coin, we have the electric vehicle rollback. The documents mention halting a $7.5 billion EV charger program. They just straight up call it wasteful.
And notice the pivot. They take that focus away from green tech and move it directly back to what they call beautiful, clean coal. There is a specific $625 million investment mentioned right here for modernizing the coal industry.
Beautiful, clean coal. That is quite a phrase to put in an official White House document. So if we go back to our core question of who wins and who loses here, the winners of the fossil fuel industry, obviously, the wealthy coal operators in West Virginia and Wyoming.
And the legacy auto manufacturers, remember, they were really struggling to transition their fleets to EVs fast enough to meet the old mandates. They get a massive reprieve here. They don't have to spend billions retooling their factories as fast.
They specifically mention in the text rolling back fuel economy standards, and they claim this avoids a $1,000 price hike on new cars for regular buyers.
Again, immediate cash in hand for the consumer versus long-term environmental impact. But you asked who the loser is. The loser is the green tech sector, the battery manufacturers, the EV startups that were completely banking on those federal subsidies to survive, and obviously anyone prioritizing long-term carbon reduction or dealing with the health impacts of localized pollution.
Right, because you live near a coal plant, your immediate health is affected. But the administration's timeline in these documents is very much about right now. Cheap gas today, lower car prices today.
Immediate gratification economics.
Okay, moving from the energy sector to the actual physical border. Section 3 of our analysis, immigration. And this is really heavy. The language here shifts gears completely from the economic stuff.
It becomes the most aggressive, militant language in the entire stack of documents.
They describe the border situation explicitly as an invasion. That is their word.
Oh.
And they claim it has been stopped dead in its tracks.
Stopped dead in its tracks. And to prove it, they cite a specific operation, Operation Midnight Hammer.
Operation Midnight Hammer. Honestly, it sounds like something out of a Tom Clancy novel or a summer action blockbuster.
It's absolutely designed to sound military. It's designed to sound overwhelming and forceful because they're talking about deploying the National Guard and active duty military to the border. And the scale of the action they're describing here is historic. They are claiming nearly 3 million removals and deportations in a single year.
3 million people. I mean, just for context, that is roughly the entire population of the city of Chicago.
It is a staggering number, but you have to look really closely at the breakdown in the footnotes of this press release. They mention that out of that 3 million total, 2.2 million are what they classify as self-deportations.
Self-deportations. Okay, let's put a massive constitutional and ethical flag on this. That's a term that has been floating around in political circles for a while. But what does it actually mean in practice? Are 2 million people just waking up one morning and deciding to pack up and leave?
Not exactly. The document mentions this is heavily facilitated by something called the CBP One app. This implies a very dark systemic shift. Self-deportation usually happens when the government intentionally makes daily life so incredibly difficult and untenable for undocumented people that they choose to leave because they simply have no other option to survive.
You completely freeze them out of society.
Right. You bar them from legally working, you bar them from renting an apartment, you bar them from opening a bank account or getting a driver's license.
You essentially starve them out of the economy.
Essentially, yes. You remove the basic ability to exist, and then, once they're desperate, you offer them a smartphone app to essentially process their own exit from the country. It's a fascinating, if incredibly chilling, use of modern technology.
It's digital bureaucracy being weaponized as a primary enforcement tool. Instead of a federal agent kicking down a door in the middle of the night, it's a software interface helping you leave because you literally can't feed your family here anymore.
It creates softer optics for a very hard, devastating policy. It keeps the violent raid footage off the evening news, which the public hates seeing, but it achieves the exact same demographic result.
It completely sanitizes the process for the public eye. And we also see some very specific targeted policies here. They mention revoking TPS, which is temporary protected status, for Somalis, Venezuelans, and Haitians.
Right. And just to clarify, TPS is usually granted to people from countries that are in active catastrophic crisis, war, famine, major natural disasters. It lets them stay and work here legally for a temporary period because it's too dangerous to go back.
And revoking it means telling them, time is up, you have to go back to a war zone, even if the situation back home hasn't improved at all.
Exactly. And there is a very specific narrative thread they use to justify this. I'm looking at a reference here to a $19 billion Somali fraud scandal in Minnesota.
$19 billion.
Yes, and this is a classic political theater tactic. There have been fraud cases involving specific groups in the past, sure, though $19 billion sounds like a highly inflated, aggregated figure over many years, rather than a single acute theft.
So it's potentially deceptive math again.
Very likely. But the tactic is to take a specific, isolated instance of crime, an alleged fraud ring, and use it to anchor and justify a much broader, sweeping policy change against an entire nationality.
So the administration's argument goes, because of this one fraud scandal, we are entirely justified in revoking legal status for every single person in that group.
Exactly. It frames the mass deportation not as a lack of humanitarian dignity, but as taxpayer fraud prevention.
Yeah.
It allows the administration to say, look, we aren't kicking out vulnerable refugees. We are just protecting the hardworking American taxpayer from massive theft.
Protecting the taxpayer. That phrase just comes up again and again and again in these pages.
It is their ultimate rhetorical shield. Look at the housing restrictions again. They boast about barring illegal aliens from taxpayer-backed mortgages.
And terminating benefits for 1.4 million people they deem ineligible.
So going back to our mission question, who is helped? The administration strongly argues this helps citizens. The logic they are pushing is strictly zero-sum. If a non-citizen gets a mortgage, they argue that's one less mortgage available for you. If a non-citizen gets a health benefit, that's tax money straight out of your pocket.
It reinforces that America First theme we see plastered everywhere. It's creating a very, very hard line between us and them. If you are on the citizen side of the line, you are protected. You get the tax cut, you get the affordable house, you get the cheap gas. But if you are on the other side,
you are excluded, completely and aggressively. And the victory lap tone of these documents, they literally call it a seismic turnaround, suggests they truly believe this is exactly what the voters hired them to do. They interpret their election win as an absolute mandate to draw these hard lines.
Well, let's talk about what happens inside those lines for citizens. Section 4 of our stack here, Law and Order. The documents claim that the murder rate in big cities, specifically calling out D.C., Chicago, Memphis, and New Orleans, has absolutely plummeted.
Plummeted is the exact word. And they claim this is the largest single-year drop in recorded history.
But they don't credit the local mayors or the city police chiefs for this drop at all.
Not even a little bit. They credit federal intervention and mass deportation.
Okay, this is where I really started wondering about the Constitution. Because usually, local crime is exactly that, local. It's handled by the mayor, the local police chief, the city council. How is the White House legally taking direct credit for a drop in street crime in Chicago?
It implies a wildly aggressive use of federal power. If they are crediting mass deportation for a drop in local murder rates, they are openly suggesting that federal agents, ICE, DHS, maybe even the FBI, are effectively policing these local city streets.
That raises a huge 10th Amendment flag, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The 10th Amendment generally reserves police powers to the individual states and cities. The federal government isn't supposed to be a national police force.
Right.
But if the federal government argues that local crime is fundamentally driven by illegal aliens or interstate drug trafficking, they can try to claim federal jurisdiction. It sounds like they're using immigration enforcement as a backdoor wedge to completely federalize local crime control.
And they specifically, repeatedly mention a crackdown in Democrat-run jurisdictions.
Which proves it's a political point just as much as a policy one. They are messaging to the suburbs. The local Democratic leaders failed you. Their progressive policies led to carnage. We, the federal government, came in and fixed it.
It completely delegitimizes the local leadership. It suggests that the federal government knows better than the actual voters of Chicago how to run the city of Chicago.
Precisely. And speaking of delegitimizing leadership, we really have to talk about the Abigail Spanberger document.
Oh, wow. Yes, the Democratic governor of Virginia, who gave the official State of the Union response last night.
Right.
The press release targeting her in this stack is,
Yeah.
I mean, it is deeply personal.
It is pure vitriol.
They outright call her a radical left lunatic. They accuse her of directly supporting carnage.
This is what we define as political theater, but it's fascinating because it is using the official taxpayer-funded machinery of the White House press office. Usually, you might see this kind of sharp, insulting language from a campaign account on social media.
Right, from a political operative.
But this is an official White House press release. It completely blurs the line between the governing office of the president and the attack dog campaign of the candidate.
And they really zero in on cultural issues with her, don't they?
They absolutely do. They briefly attack her economic stance, sure, but the language reserves its absolute most intense heat for phrases like extreme gender ideology and men in women's bathrooms.
The classic cultural wedge issue.
It is. They are using these highly emotional cultural flashpoints to discredit her entirely as a serious person. The strategy is clear. If we can paint her as culturally radical and dangerous to your kids, she wants men in your daughter's locker room, then you simply won't listen to her when she tries to talk about tax brackets or healthcare disparities.
It effectively neutralizes any legitimate economic counterargument she might make by painting her as culturally unacceptable to the mainstream.
It's distraction by outrage.
It's very effective theater, and it provides a really sharp contrast to the other side of the White House messaging we have here. Let's move to Section 5, Social Policy. Specifically, the First Lady's platform.
Melania Trump's Fostering the Future and Be Best initiatives.
Reading this fact sheet, it feels like we just stepped into a completely different building. We go from carnage and invasion and lunatics straight to foster care housing and artificial intelligence education scholarships.
It's a highly necessary counterbalance for the administration's brand. Every single administration needs a soft power element, while the president's policies are entirely focused on hard, aggressive power, deportations, drilling, military force.
But the First Lady's initiative is entirely about nurturing and uplifting.
Exactly. She's secured $30 million for foster youth housing. She's handing out tech scholarships.
It creates a sense of balance for the ticket. It allows the administration to say, look, we do care about the vulnerable, even as they are executing these very tough exclusionary policies everywhere else.
It softens the overall image. It appeals to a completely different demographic. Perhaps the suburban independent women who might be really turned off by the aggressive drill baby drill and midnight hammer rhetoric.
But even inside the social policy sphere, there is some distinct hard power creeping in. I'm looking at the drug policy documents from the Office of National Drug Control Policy.
The ONDCP, right.
Their new public campaign is called One Click, One Death.
That is a terrifying, highly effective slogan.
It really is. It's entirely focused on the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah.
But here's the policy shift. They have officially designated drug cartels as terrorist organizations.
Okay, that is a crucial legal distinction. We really need to pause on that because it changes everything.
Why does that specific label matter so much? A criminal is a criminal, right?
Because words have massive legal power in the federal government. If a cartel is classified as a criminal enterprise, you send law enforcement, you send the FBI and the DEA. You build a legal case, you issue indictments, you attempt extradition, you have a trial with a judge and a jury.
Due process.
Exactly. But if they are classified as a terrorist organization, you are moving completely out of the realm of law enforcement and into the realm of the military.
You don't send a beat cop after a terrorist. You send a drone strike.
Exactly. And the documents explicitly mention Operation Southern Spear and eliminating narco-terrorists. This is framing the drug war not as a metaphor, but as an actual literal war.
It suggests military rules of engagement instead of Miranda rights.
Yes. So the help here is ostensibly protecting American families from the poison of fentanyl. That's a clear, massive benefit to society. But the method they are using involves massive militarization and military classification of foreign civilian groups.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle today,
Yeah.
Section 6, Foreign Policy, or as the administration officially calls it in these headers, Peace Through Strength.
They literally refer to the president in this document as the president of peace.
Which is a very bold title to put in print.
Very bold.
They claim to have ended 8 different wars. 8,
Huh.
including Israel-Hamas and, heavily implied by the context here, Russia-Ukraine.
And how did they do it? That's the key to understanding their foreign policy doctrine.
Well, the text says it's strictly through unmatched American strength and restoring respect and fear.
Fear. That is the operative word in their entire foreign policy. The narrative isn't that we sat down with allies, found common ground, and signed a diplomatic treaty. It's that we utterly terrified our adversaries into total submission.
They mentioned something called a Gaza peace plan and this other initiative called the Golden Dome.
Total orbital supremacy. It sounds like an incredibly advanced, space-based missile defense system.
Like Ronald Reagan's Star Wars initiative from the 80s.
Exactly like Star Wars. The core idea is that if we build a technological shield that can stop absolutely anything you throw at us, you have no choice but to stop fighting because your weapons are useless.
Again, peace is achieved not through mutual trust or diplomacy, but through overwhelming, untouchable military superiority.
And economically, they are aggressively pulling back from the global stage to fund this.
Right, they mention withdrawing funding from UNRWA, the UN Relief Agency, and there's a heavily implied withdrawal from the World Health Organization as well.
They frame these international humanitarian organizations as globalist and wasteful. The argument they make to the voter is very simple. Why should we pay billions for the UN to operate overseas when we can spend that money right here at home?
It connects right back to that $2,400 in the American pocket from Section 1.
Exactly. Every single dollar not sent to the UN or the WHO is a dollar that can theoretically stay in the U.S. economy to lower your taxes.
It's a very cohesive, airtight worldview.
It really is. It's remarkably consistent across every department.
So let's try to pull this all together. We have gone through the stack. We've seen the targeted tax cuts, the massive drilling permits, the militarized deportations, the claims of local crime drops. What is the ultimate synthesis here? Based purely on the text, how do we define this golden age?
If you look at the totality of these documents, the golden age is defined by a very specific, rigid set of conditions. It requires historically low taxes, hyper-cheap domestic energy, completely closed militarized borders, and incredibly aggressive federal policing of local streets.
Not a very tidy package.
It is. And to answer our core question from the beginning, who is actually helped? The text builds a very strong, undeniable case that the primary beneficiary is the working citizen family.
The family that drives a gas-powered car, works for tips or overtime, desperately wants to buy a single-family home without getting outbid by BlackRock, and is deeply worried about urban crime.
Exactly. If you fit that specific demographic profile, these documents are loudly telling you, we did all of this for you. We lowered your gas price at the pump, we lowered your income taxes, we forcefully kicked out your labor competition, and we made your local streets safe by circumventing your mayor.
And who is left out of this golden age?
Non-citizens, certainly. They are aggressively and systematically excluded from every benefit.
Salaried workers are left out of the tax breaks.
Right. People who rely on environmental regulations for their basic health are left out. If you live near a deregulated coal plant, you might save $50 a month on gas, but your air quality is going to drastically suffer.
And frankly, anyone who opposes the administration politically is left out. The vitriolic language used against Governor Spanberger in official documents clearly suggests that political opposition is framed not just as a disagreement, but as being an actual enemy of the state's success.
It is a deeply polarizing vision of prosperity. It presents a world where freedom is defined very narrowly. It's freedom from environmental regulation, freedom from global humanitarian obligations, freedom from economic competition with non-citizens.
But, and I think this is the real kicker here, that specific brand of freedom is only achieved through the incredibly heavy hand of federal power.
That is the ultimate paradox of these documents. You get the tax cut and you get the cheap gas. But the trade-off is living under a federal government that is willing to ban private investors from buying homes, deploy active military to the domestic border, and completely federalize local city crime fighting.
Which leaves you with a really big, provocative question to chew on long after we wrap up here. Is the ultimate trade-off for this specific type of prosperity, this $2.99 gas and $2,400 in your pocket, is the cost of that a permanent, irreversible expansion of executive authority?
Right. Are we ultimately comfortable with a centralized government that is powerful enough to unilaterally give us everything we want, knowing that the exact same government is now powerful enough to take it all away?
That is the real question buried deep in the fine print of these policies. And that is our analysis for today.
We'll see you next time.